Now let's take this idea, Minimax, preserving choice, and broaden the view a bit. We need to think about the boundaries of the system, because when we talk about preserving choices, we have to ask, whose choices are we actually talking about? And this is where the work of Werner Ulrich, specifically his critical systems heuristics, becomes absolutely essential. It adds another crucial ethical layer. Ulrich's core insight, and it's a profound one, is that every time managers or designers draw a boundary for a system, whether they're defining who's on the team, who counts as a stakeholder, or even just what metrics are considered important, that act of drawing the boundary inevitably includes some people, some factors, and just as importantly, it excludes others.
Right. And often the people who get excluded are the ones who end up dealing with the consequences, the fallout from decisions they had absolutely no say in.
That's the quiet injustice, often, of system design. You might optimize everything beautifully inside your organizational boundary. But the real cost, the harm, gets pushed outside. It gets externalized onto people who lack power or voice in your system. Maybe it's your suppliers, maybe it's temporary contractors, maybe it's the local community affected by your operations.
Yeah, the negative externalities, as the economists might call them, but Ulrich frames it ethically.
Exactly. So the ethical requirement that Ulrich derives from this is quite demanding. It says managers have a responsibility to actively, consciously try to identify who loses in the system they are designing or changing. If our core principle is minimizing the maximum potential harm, minimax, then we simply cannot ignore the negative consequences that fall on those who were pushed outside the boundary, marginalized by the design itself. Ethics, in this view, demands that we act in ways that actually allow for the participation and, Ulrich uses this strong word, the emancipation of those who are excluded or negatively affected, giving them back some agency, some choice.
Okay, let's try to ground that. An example. Say, a big company is doing a major IT transformation. Huge project. The boundary for who's involved is drawn pretty tightly. Senior leadership, the core IT project team, maybe key people from the main business units who will benefit directly.
Right. Standard practice.
But who's typically excluded from that design process? Often it's the actual end users, the folks on the ground who have to wrestle with the system's flaws every single day. Or maybe it's the long-term maintenance team, the ones who know all the weird quirks of legacy systems being replaced, the ones who will have to keep this new thing running eventually.
Exactly. And then when the new system inevitably hits problems, because they always do, where does the harm land? It lands squarely on that maintenance team, who now have to fix something they didn't design, maybe without adequate resources or training. And it lands on those end users who are stuck using a clunky interface or dealing with bugs they could have warned about if only they'd been asked. They never had a choice. They're suffering the consequences of decisions made entirely outside their sphere of influence.
So connecting this back to Minimax, when we ask Ulrich's question, who loses? Yeah, we're actually asking a Minimax question, but applied to those at the edges. We're asking, what's the worst possible outcome for those people who are marginalized by this system boundary, and how do we minimize that harm?
Precisely. The moral responsibility isn't just about the final outcome.